I empathize with the Jewish people. A lot of times when we talk about the sufferings and the persecution of the Jewish community, we think about the Holocaust as though that was the be-all of what they went through. What we need to remember is that the Holocaust is not a single event. And it's not even just about what happened between 1939 to 1945. The Holocaust was actually the culmination of hundreds of years of European persecution and oppression of the Jewish community. If we look at the history of Jews in Europe, we will see that the Jews were expelled from large chunks of Europe for the last 800 years or so. They were expelled from England in 1290. They were expelled from France in 1306, and they were expelled repeatedly from France. They were expelled, they were invited back, and then they were expelled again until I think 1394, when they were finally expelled almost permanently. They were expelled from Spain in 1492. Now, the expulsion of the Jews in Spain is not really a total expulsion, because they were allowed to stay in Spain if they converted to Christianity. So it's either leave Spain, convert to Christianity, or die. So that was what happened with the Jews in Europe. And for a large number of them, their final destination throughout all this European expulsion was to go to Muslim lands. So they went to the Morocco, Maghribi, they went to Tunisia, they went to Yemen, they went to the Ottoman Empire. So while they were being expelled from Europe, they ran to Muslim lands. Now, why were they expelled from Europe? There were a few reasons. There was the Christian belief, and it still exists till today, that Jews were responsible for killing Jesus. So that's a major factor in Jew hatred amongst Christian Europe. There was also the belief in blood libel, the belief that Jews killed Christian children for their blood for Jewish rituals. And another reason was economic. Now, Christians were not allowed to lend money for interest. So the Jewish community took that role. They lent money to the kings and the knights, the aristocrats, and they charged interest. So for the Jews, they feel that, you know what, this is my business and it's a fair thing for me to do. But it resulted in a lot of the elites in these European states being indebted to the Jews. So one thing that they did was, when they were not able to repay the Jewish community of the loans that they've taken, was to expel them. So that's what Europe did. In the 20th century, which actually from 1880s right up to about 1921, for example, in Russia, there were pogroms, there were attacks on the Jewish community, and thousands of Jews were killed in Russia. Throughout the history of Judaism in Europe, they suffered a lot. They were killed, they were oppressed, they were persecuted. In the 20th century, between World War I and World War II, we can see a lot of caricatures of the Jews, right? The Europeans made a lot of dehumanizing references to them. When we look at all these things that have happened throughout all the years, the Holocaust as a continuation of oppression became very, very clear, right? So the Holocaust was what Hitler and his gangs of murderers referred to their final solution to the Jewish question. The question was what to do with the Jews in Europe. A lot of European elites and their population did not want to have Jews in Europe. So the final solution was their way to kill off a community that they despised. And yet, whenever the Jewish community suffered in Europe, they ran to Muslim lands. Now, how were they treated in Muslim lands? Of course, they were seen as migrants, right? And they were seen as not belonging to the Muslim community. They were not treated as Muslims, of course, because again, the purpose of Muslim land was to help the people who reside within it to live according to Islam. But they were allowed to live according to their own laws. So, for example, in the Ottoman Empire, now, according to Lucien Goubet, who's a Jewish elder, he argued that the existing Jewish communities of lands so far conquered by the Turks had for centuries suffered only humiliation, harassment, and persecution at the hands of their Christian rulers. The Ottomans changed all that. They trusted the Jews and valued the contribution they could make to the economic development of the empire. Within the bounds of Islamic law, they treated the Jews with fairness and justice, and the Jews responded with gratitude and loyalty. So the Jewish community were allowed to live within their own communities and governed by their own laws, and that was known as the Millet system. Of course, it was not fully a utopia. They existed together, and Jews were allowed to rise through the ranks and to be part of the larger political system that was the Ottoman Empire. This changed, however, in the early 20th century when Zionists started to migrate to Palestine and started to kill and massacre and cause terrorism in the land of the Palestinians. Muslim leaders informed the Zionist terrorist leaders that they were then unable to protect the Jewish community within their own lands. So there were riots, but these riots were in response to what the Zionist terrorists were doing in Palestine. A majority of Jews from Muslim lands then migrated to Palestine because they saw that as a way for them to have their own political independence. These riots were not natural. It was in response to what was going on in Palestine. And the reason they wanted to have their own land was not because of their relationship with the Muslims. It was precisely because of the persecution that they faced in Europe, where the Germans had killed 6 million Jews with the tacit consent of the rest of the European leaders. So were the Jews persecuted? Yes. Were they massacred? Yes. Were they oppressed? Yes. But they were massacred, they were persecuted, and they were oppressed by Europeans. Muslims have always treated the Jewish community with kindness, and that is what hurts us the most. We have protected the Jewish community for more than 1,000 years. We have always provided safe refuge for them. And Christian Europe has always been the ones that persecuted them, that killed them, that took away their properties, that butchered them. These were all history of Christian Europe in relation to the Jews, which makes the Zionist constant dehumanization, dispossession, massacres of the Palestinian Muslims so difficult to accept. Europe now pretends to protect and support the Jewish community. But I cannot help but think that apart from the guilt that they feel for killing 6 million Jews or accepting the killing of these 6 million Jews and all the persecution that they have inflicted against the Jews for the last 800 years, there may be another reason why Europe is so supportive of Israel. Europe has been trying to get rid of the Jewish community for hundreds of years. They have finally succeeded. Israel may actually represent Hitler's final solution to the question of the Jewish problems in Europe. They have gotten rid of the Jews in Europe by sending them to Palestine, and they do not want the Jewish community back.